Good afternoon. There's no glasses. Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. If you want to move up closer to the front, you're welcome to. Good afternoon and welcome to the arts panel, and welcome welcome back to campus. It's great to see so many people out, and it's going to be a great beginning of the weekend for Cornell. I just want to make a few introductions and introductory remarks and introduce our panel for today, and then we're going to start with the screening of a really wonderful treat for you, a documentary film by Pete Carroll. The arts at Cornell interest us now more than ever because we're at a critical point in the campaign, as you know, for Cornell. And we're also at a point where a tremendous amount of new faculty will be joining us in the next 15 to 20 years. And also we're at a competitive moment where we're seeing a lot of things happening out there in other places and very exciting things happening at Cornell. And this panel really came out of an idea that Jim Burns, who is the chair of the Committee on the Arts, and Marty Moses, who's head of the councils, it came out of a discussion really about how to highlight the arts and to expose all that we're doing to you. Just a few words about our panelists. Very happy to have all of them here. A very distinguished panel, starting with the artist Patrick Doherty. And Patrick has he's done over 200 sculptural installations around the world, and Cornell is now privileged to have one of his great pieces. I won't say the best piece, but it probably is, we think, but a fantastic piece in Collegetown, right in front of Sheldon Court. If you haven't been there, you should definitely visit it. Patrick is from North Carolina. He was born in Oklahoma, but has lived in North Carolina for quite a long time. As I said, he's been around the world doing sculptures in Japan, in London, in the United States. He was the recipient of the Henry Moore Foundation Fellowship in 1993, the National Endowment for the Arts Japan U.S. Creative Arts Fellowship in 1991, the Pollock-Krasner Foundation grant in 1994. He's got a very, very interesting resume and a very interesting life that he's lived in making really creative work. Next to his left is Choo, who is a fantastic colleague of mine in the arts. Choo is a senior lecturer in dance in the Department of Theater, Film and Dance. She has danced with the Viola Farber Dance Company from 1976 to 1980 and the Lucinda Childs Dance Company in 1980 to 1984. She's toured the U.S. and abroad. She taught dance technique and composition in New York, St. Louis, Paris, before coming to Cornell in 1989, where she's been ever since. Her teaching right now includes dance technique, dance history, and composition. So fantastic to have her here. On her left, is Terry Plater, who again is another cherished colleague for many years in the Department of City and Regional Planning, and more currently as the Associate Dean of the Graduate School. Terry has a unique background because she's all things. She's kind of, she's an artist. She's has been to school in architecture, city and regional planning, and now she has been in academic affairs for the last 5 years, I believe. she's committed to making the connections that we have talked about and we'll talk about this afternoon between community and the university. Terry has been serving as the chair of the Ithaca Public Arts Commission. She's also a practicing artist, as I mentioned, working in oils and pastels, and she has exhibited here on campus at the Willard Straight Hall and Gallery, and just finished recently a residency at the Saltonstall Foundation in New York State. So fantastic to have her join us. Thank you. I'll say just one sentence about myself. I've been at Cornell for 12 years. I've been director of the Cornell Council for the Arts for 4 years. The council has been around since 1965, and that's 41 years. And the council is a really great resource because it's independent from any of the colleges or departments, but has its tentacles really in every part of the university and every creative aspect. Kind of the analogy that we give is for those of you who live in New York or New York State, Time Warner Cable provides your cable connection. It gets you content from other people, and then they also have HBO. And similar to that, the Council for the Arts is both a giver of grants, about $80,000 in competitive arts grants to students, faculty, and staff. And then we also have original programming. And Patrick's piece that you'll be seeing a lot of today and a lot of our other initiatives are what we would call original programming. So we have a kind of a dual function, and we have a lot of support from all 12 of the arts departments and units on campus. I also want to introduce just two people, and then we're going to go directly to the screening of the film. Michi Oki, if you'll stand. Michi is associate professor of landscape architecture, and he was the project curator for the Patrick Doherty installation in Collegetown, and he's really done a fantastic job on both facilitating over 80 meetings necessary to get that piece built, and also being in the trenches working on the piece actually with Patrick, as many of us did. Bob Bertoy is in the room as well. It was really exciting 3 weeks that we had here, and a lot of students involved, so thank you, Michi, and appreciate your work. And then just as a segue to the fantastic filmed entertainment that you're about to see is Peter Carroll, who is standing to my right. Peter, we had the idea when we started this installation project with Patrick Doherty to film it and to do it in a very creative way. And Patrick probably will see more of himself in this film and kind of go through a psychoanalysis here because I think Pete Carroll, who has filmed both independently and for the university, is just a fantastic talent, and he really captured, I think you'll agree with me when you see it, he really has captured the spirit of the 3 weeks that we were all involved in just this past September. So thank you, Peter, for your work. And the Ithaca Public Arts Commission and many of the credits that you'll see at the end of the film, which I'm not going to go into, speak to the people and the resources that really supported this piece, including the Ithaca Public Arts Commission. So thank you to all of them. With that, we'll start the program. The film will run about 10 minutes flat, and then we'll go into a series of 10-minute presentations by each of the panelists, and then we'll open up for, hopefully, you'll have some thoughts, and we'll open up for a good discussion. So I'll leave it over to Peter. Thank you. Thank you again, Peter. Patrick?
My notes over here. Thank you all so much. That was great. I really appreciate it. You know, I just wanted to say a few things connected with art in the public eye. And I wanted specifically to contrast art in public places movement with this kind of a new initiative, a kind of a new way of work and a recent phenomena in which artists come and do installations, usually for some organization in a town, and they may actually work in a slightly off the beaten path, and somehow their work is started to be recognized by the public, and then slowly people start driving by and the momentum builds, and so this work is drawn into the public eye. Maybe to talk about both, I'd say that the majority of the large monumental sculptures that you see today around in public had their beginnings in Percent for the Art programs in which the city, state, county, sometimes private industry take a bit of the percentage of the the cost of the building, and they put it into producing a piece of art that goes with the building itself. And that process usually takes place because you get a panel that's empowered, and they're experts. They decided on an artist. The artist then makes the sculpture in his studio, or he gets a factory to make the sculpture. The work is installed. Sometimes it's installed overnight. The person comes out to get their newspaper in the morning, and they look up, and there's a big new public art project completed across the street. They don't even know where it came from, and maybe they don't know anything about it. There's some downside for artists that get involved in this process, because like in North Carolina right now, in Raleigh, near where I live, Plensa, a Spanish artist who has done a wonderful work in Chicago area, was asked by a panel to build a work in front of the convention center in Raleigh. And so he gets started on this, and then all of a sudden the city manager decides that he doesn't want this work in Raleigh. We have a big sponsor who's willing to pay for the work, but that opens the Pandora's box. Instantly, artists in the area decide, well, why shouldn't they ask us to plan it? Why should they give this money to someone else? The politicians weigh in, and then everybody in the community, all these different publics, come to bear and decide, hey, what would really be good for Raleigh? And by the time the conversation is done, then nothing is done, and the guy is disappointed and has to try to find another place for his sculpture. The third thing is that these works are supposed to last forever. These big public artworks, they're supposed to last forever, and the materials that they're made of are somehow supposed to be able to protect the work for decades. And so oftentimes that work is what I think of as hard-edged, and it's kind of unrelenting. And when you go up to the sculptures, you look at them, and you can somehow connect with the concept behind the work, but it's really hard to personally connect with the surfaces of these works, and sometimes you feel like you're touching an alien spacecraft of some sort. I also think that a lot of these big public artworks are guided by a kind of art gallery mentality. In other words, if you make a piece of sculpture in your studio, and then sometimes you think, well, I'll put it in a gallery setting. So you go into a really neutral space. It's a big white space, and the object that you place there gets to set the rules. And so the way you look at it is determined by the object, the scale that the artist wanted you to see. If you take that same situation, take a sculpture that was designed in a studio and kind of meant for a gallery situation, you stick it out in public, things go wrong immediately because there's just too much competition. You have noise, you have light, you have all kinds of scale issues with other things around it. Sometimes you have modern things like cars and street lights and all these kinds of things on in and around the sculpture that really look better and count more than the sculpture itself. And sometimes you hear people say the word plop art. And what I think that is a sculpture that's in over its head, that it might be a very good sculpture, but it's put in a situation where it can't compete with the surroundings. The other thing I wanted to say about some of the large-scale work that we see in our environment is that it's a top-down event. In other words, a panel of experts decide that this is good, and they say to the public, you need to like this because this is really good. And so there's always this huge educational component with every one of these things. We're going to have to teach the public that this is a good piece of work. To be fair to the artists, a lot of times these public art projects, the artist starts out with a really great idea, but by the time the idea is ground on and goes through all these committees and comes out the other end, it's just a pale shadow of the original idea. And finally, these big public art projects are expensive. $200,000 to $2 million is an easy price for a large monumental sculpture. But I'd like to contrast that with installation work, which is what I do. When I first started working, I was asked to do a work at an artist-run space, and I made something that I thought would be, or designed something I thought would be really great in that space, and then I realized it wasn't going to fit through the door. So I ended up calling, could I come and work there? Could I bring my materials there? Well, yes, you could. So in subsequent years of arriving at museums and galleries on all kinds of non-art spaces with materials by the truckload, I learned to work on site and work on site successfully. And I found out that I was like just one of a whole number of artists that were doing the same thing. We weren't really aware that that was going to turn into what people would say installation art or environmental art or on-site installations. You know, all of these monikers. We didn't know that we were doing that, but all of us had some of the same things in common. And I just wanted to talk about a few, and by contrast, a few of the attributes of it. One is that generally the sponsors and the sites for these installations works are not high profile or high pressure sites. A lot of times they're just a museum say, hey, could you work in our front yard? Or a botanic garden saying, hey, we've got this place out in the back, just go on out there and work. And so what it does is the artist is not put under any pressure. They say, well, go do your best work. Just do whatever you want to. Do something good, which is in high contrast to some of these other situations that you get into. Their biggest issue is we want you to do something interesting, we want you to do something provocative, and we want you to do something that interests and excites the public that we serve. The other thing about it is that this work is temporary, and it's usually seen as temporary, even if it's going to last 4 years. It's still kind of temporary. And so when you're dealing with temporary work, often you get to explore sites or non-art spaces that you wouldn't really consider appropriate for sculpture. So you might say, hey, could I use those 3 trees out in front of your building? Or could I take your window out and stick part of the sculpture on the inside, run it through the window, and put up part of it on the outside? They say, well, I don't see why not. The work is temporary. The good thing about temporary, it allows you to capitalize on more fragile materials. And so, for me, people understand sticks. Sticks come from your backyard. This is a material It's the material of our distant history. And so everybody knows about sticks. They have lots of good associations with sticks. And so, when you imagine speaking about the human condition, you could see how you could potentially do it through such an ephemeral material. One thing is that working on site allows a lot of reactivity. For example, when you start looking for a way of building something on a site, a lot of times you go around and examine the site. You examine all the buildings around that site. You examine the particulars of the tree, and you look for starting points in the site itself that's going to help you figure out what you're going to make. And as you proceed through working on this site and you come to know the space even better, and gain more knowledge about it, you find yourself counter-correcting. In other words, you might have made a mistake about the scale when you imagined it. So you can rescale it. You can do something new. When you see yourself actually working better, you can work in that more profitable way. You see these, tough-looking guys go by, you say, I think I might better make this wall a little thicker. They might get on it. You see a heavy wind blow. You say, that might blow this thing over. I'm going to substantiate it a little bit more. So the great idea about being able to work on site means that you can be very reactive and can craft your object to really fit that site. There is Another thing is the drama of building. You are working in public to some degree. People come by, you talk to them. They see over a course of time what you're doing. And, you know, eventually you stop talking about the work and the work has to start, the sculpture has to start doing the work. My intention is to be able to relate or to affect every person, even the most casual viewer that walks by the sculpture. And I want to make a sculpture that is so powerful, that's so interesting, that really captures people's imagination in such a way that they continue to like it. And in a way, I think that this is, as opposed to a kind of a tops down, this is a bottoms up. You know, the sculpture's got to sell itself. It's got to be good. It can't survive in its setting unless it has a resonance with the people who it's meant for. And finally, you know, doing this kind of work is less expensive. And so an organization, rather than sponsoring a large monumental work, could sponsor many smaller installation works and satisfy a lot of longing in the community for just having new things happening on the street and new ideas presented. And what I want to do is to really thank the Cornell Council for the Arts for being willing to go to bat for installation work, for trying for a grounds-up approach or a bottoms-up approach, and trying for a groundswell, and trying to get out there and make something in public that really, interests people, that strives to entertain in some way. I can say that it wasn't easy. When Milton mentioned that people had to go to 80 meetings, this is no lie. Although it was a little or an underutilized space, there was just a lot of concern about this space. And so they had to, Milton and Michi, Pamela, they spent all their time for a month just going to every meeting trying to get permission for this thing to occur down there in College Town. Not only that, we forced them to roll up their sleeves. I can remember there was one afternoon when Milton was working on the bottom, Pamela was working inside, I was working on the middle, and Michi was up at the top trying to get in those vagrant branches up there and calm them down. I do think this project was really successful. I do think that we captured people's imagination and we moved this project from the kind of the periphery really into the public eye. And, for that, I think that it was a great opportunity for me, and I want to thank everyone that was involved in the project.
Thank you, Patrick. We feel the same way. And I think everybody in the room does. Choo.
Patrick's installation I find stunningly beautiful. And working in the Schwartz Center, I have the great fortune to see it every day, to experience it every day. It was once a space that was undifferentiated from me, somewhat anonymous. But since Patrick's installation, it's something that I would look forward to every day to walk through. And I do walk through that space every day, rushing from my building to cross the street to College Town Bagels to grab something to eat. So I understand the change, the enormous change, the important change that this installation has given all of us. And it's something, as I said, I look forward to every day because I'm not quite sure what my response is going to be each time I walk through it. Sometimes I'm just awed by the voluptuousness of the pieces. Other times I'm swept off my feet by the lines that spiral upwards. And sometimes I just want to go inside and investigate the smallness, the tiniest details, and how the tiniest details can make this enormous, powerful statement and impression, a daily impression on me, on all of us, I'm sure. What the installation has done for me is made the space sensate. It's an experience that has just been transformed for me. And I see it not only as the installation has made this powerful change, but I see it every day, especially this time of the year, which is 1 month since the opening of the installation. In this 1 month, the trees have become quite bare, the leaves have fallen, and what this change, the seasonal change has done, has revealed, even more so, I think for me, the power of your work. And what it has done is revealed the natural world as well as the world that we have constructed by its side. I love it for these and many other reasons. The structures also have, as I said, this once anonymous space has defined it so that it's become several spaces. It's suddenly become an inside space and an outside space at the same time, alongside each other. It's created a mystery within the inside space, a mystery that I can only imagine, perhaps peek through as I look through a window and wonder about. So it gives me at the same time the sense of belonging inside, of belonging and outside in the public. We also see in the sculptures the work, the endeavor that has gone into the making of these pieces. Of course, they're alive and present as being firmly rooted in that space. But also, we have the sense of the time that has gone into the making during the making of these pieces. The intricacies, we see it in the intricacies and the layerings of the saplings, the amount of work, we can imagine the amount of work that has gone into constructing these enormous, gorgeous pieces. And of course, I've seen it, and many of us have seen it as it's progressed over the 3 weeks. Every day I've seen it change from hour to hour as I peek out through the dance studio over all of you working, Michi, Patrick, and Milton, see the changes that overcome these pieces as they transform. And the arts, I think, are agents of change. But this is a very complex interaction. It is not as though change was simply good for its own sake, for the sheer pleasure of new sensations, or that change would stop otherwise without this inspiration of the arts. But time is change, even more accelerated now in our world. And the spaces that we occupy daily, our positions, our situations, are coming to seem even more provisional. Thinking along these lines, as Patrick's installations invite us to do, it might be just as accurate to say that arts are agents of stability. They are always involved with change, and they give themselves over to it passionately. They help to make us alert to the present, the changes from moment to moment, and to find ourselves, they help us to make us alert to the present, the changes from moment to moment, and to find ourselves, wholly ourselves again, in the here and now. Through the arts, we compose the changing world and reinvent it for human purposes. Patrick's installation next to the performing arts, next to the Schwartz Center for the Performing Arts, seems logical, seems like a logical choice. What he has done with his work is assimilate sculpture to the performing arts. His sculptures, actually, as Patrick was describing them himself, the sculptures perform themselves, they compose themselves, they are dancing figures. They are figures of this time and this place. And the continuous movements that we find gracing these installations, in fact, parallel the performing bodies inside the Schwartz Center right next to them. His installation begins to bring coherence to the confusion in the boundary between College Town and Cornell campus. This strip of College Avenue, for the most part, is quite functional. It remains somewhat anonymous. There is, of course, Stella's and College Town bagels, but for the most part, it remains somewhat indifferent for many of us. And what Patrick's work has done is given this space a different experience for us. There are students who would, for the most part, walk through the space unthinkingly, then for the first time come upon it and are puzzled by it perhaps, probably quite enraptured by it, and urged to go into it and to investigate it, to be curious about it, so that in fact the installation, this work, has transformed the space for them. And it has it so that every time they pass through it now, they pass through this area, the experience is different from what it used to be. And it's an impression that's a lasting one, and that remains with them as they leave Cornell. And art has this capacity of defining space and time deliberately, very consciously. This is good, and a necessary good. As trustees of the university, you may well feel this even more so, even more urgently than I do. Cornell is a time and a place, an infinite collection of times and places. And each time you return here, I can imagine that you are grateful to Cornell for representing, for making conscious and remarkable and available the extraordinary times that you have spent here, and the places that you have come to know under Cornell's horizon. This is a core function of the university in the landscape of the present, surrounded as we are by the otherwise bewildering productions of consumer capitalism. Everything seems possible now, for better and sometimes for worse. And the university represents the promise of intelligibility and of a civil society. To put this point in a different way, the arts are, in the end, a social practice, the performing arts especially, as we gather in a public space to see them. And they teach us that all our most significant practices are, finally, social ones. The arts rehabilitate time and space by defining us as subjects in time and space, participating in an event and at a scene. In a world where forms, meaning, effects are changing with delirious speed, we, the producers, as well as consumers, feel the threat, not so much the threat, but feel the pressure of an urgent economy that can be often indifferent to the individual soul. And the arts make an interpretive space that is relational and where we can reaffirm the gift of human relationships. I've been here on the dance faculty since 1989, and over these 16 to 17 years, I've seen many changes. The students themselves have changed as a body as they come in from year to year. But what has remained a constant is a remark that I hear over and over again, even as recently as 2 days ago in a conversation with a dance student. And this remark is, I need dance. I need this place to focus myself in a way that I can't otherwise in any other study. It has made it possible for me to get through my years here at Cornell. Dance is a study of art which is all-encompassing. It is absolute. It is a ravishing dedication. It's a devotion of the entire body, of the mind, of the soul, of the heart. As a student is introduced to the discipline of dance, she is introduced to a relentless training. She learns to challenge herself, and it's a choice that she makes if she decides to dance, that she makes herself. And it's a challenge that is both private and public, of course, in performance. And the subtleties of the different demands that are made on her from the outside as well as from within herself, the demands to push herself further, to try for something different, to try for something more difficult, to see whether she can accomplish it. The subtleties of these kind of demands, how to control them, when to, in fact, address these challenges, allow for the dance student to take responsibility for her own body, for her own expression. And in shaping and making the body more articulate and expressive, the dance students are discovering what is uniquely theirs. They learn to be attentive to the present moment. They are producing something and not consuming. They are rethinking what is beautiful and significant as work and as pleasure. And they come to the university with ideas and certain habits of mind. And here they are given the opportunity to question and investigate these conventions and probably to reimagine themselves. Dance is both a form of continuity and a break from the past. In fact, the history of modern dance is defined by generations of radical rebels who push aside the lexicon that has been given to them as they search for something new, as they search for different meanings, new ways of conceiving meaning in their world and in the body. The medium the medium, whether it be the body as in dance or marble or space or painting or sticks, is taken seriously in art. Art is a way of exploring this medium and its meaning and in the creation of meaning. And art is reserved for that part of culture which is devoted to communicating and sorting through confusions of what is really important, and of establishing them and giving them lasting impression. In dance, this word lasting may seem contrary to the actual being of dance, which is ephemeral. The form of dance is ephemeral. Dance is of the present moment. It is in the instant. It is in the performance. Once the performance is over, the dance is over. There is no text, up until very recently, of course, with the advent of video, there has never been a text unlike other forms of art. There has been no way to record dance. The only memory that dance has is in the body, and the memory that is passed from one dancer to another, from teacher to student. In the training of dance, the youth and age both are made very present and made apparent. Dance shows the efforts of the discipline and endeavor. The body can be trained, and in its training, the body feels its strength, but this strength is not forever. It's in fact perishable, as the body is. The body is in dance only in the moment, of its performance. But in that moment, there is a kinesthetic connection with the audience. It is a shared experience. It is dance is an expression, as the other arts are, of course. It's an expression and communication. In our world today of instantaneous communications and connections, the new technologies of communication and reproduction make every development of arts instantly recognized and appropriated. Today, what is new often cannot germinate, does not have the time to germinate. New ideas are quickly taken hold of and immediately used. And the responsibility, I think one of the responsibilities of art in this digital age is to clarify for people what it means that their lives are becoming virtual, and to recover the continuities, to recognize what we have in common, to celebrate the possibility of community. Dance has a privileged place in this discussion. It is enthralled by the body. As the world becomes less recognizably human, dance proposes that the body is crucial, that the body can discover and make new ways of moving, but it remains basic in its integrity. The dancing body, the body as a dancing signifier, is a sign of integrity, a unit or measure of meaning that is always moving with and among other bodies, and that is nevertheless, and all the more surely, its whole living self. Art is change as human choice, turning time and space into a human world. I would only add that if these claims seem idealistic, the reason is that I spend days and nights here at Cornell with the most promising students in the world, the figures of our shared future. Thank you.
Thank you, Juvain, and she reminds us that students are the core of our enterprise at the university, and so thank you very much for that. Terry?
Thank you, Milton. I have my standard thank yous that I want to make, but I have to say that in addition to the obvious thank you, I really, really am pleased to be here. I think this is extremely good evidence of why we need something to get like-minded people together. Those of us in the choir, I presume we're in the choir, and some of you are in the choir, and those who are not, because I have never met Patrick, I've never met Juvain before, even though I've been here 12 years as well. And not being very personal, I would feel really cheated if I hadn't heard your presentations. I feel really honored, and I don't know if it's just chance that got me here, but I'm really grateful to have heard what I heard for a couple of reasons, making me rethink my talk a little bit. I'll get to that in just a moment. I'm known to give homework, and so I'm going to tell you where I'm going to end up. I had planned to ask at the end of my talk for your ideas and your suggestions. I know you have them. I have a ton of new ones after hearing my colleagues speak. I think it would be a missed opportunity if we did not ask you to do that. I have to leave early. That's my apology. I'm going to have to leave here a bit early. So I'm going to make a note that Michi, who've already met there, is also a member of the Public Art Commission. Would you raise your hand, Michi? So if you get suggestions or questions about public art, you can, if you have them, you can direct them to Michi in my absence. And I want you to hear my few remarks, which are much more prosaic than those of my colleagues. I hope they'll still be interesting, keeping in mind the idea that I'd love for us to get your ideas and suggestions about ways in which we can move forward with this. Listening to Jumei refer to you as trustees of the university makes me think that you're also trustees of this idea, I would like to think, the idea of collaboration, the idea of higher education and the arts, and that makes it seem to me a very much more special an undertaking. I do also want to say that I had a list of descriptors, the things that we on the Public Art Commission tell the public to keep in mind when they are proposing pieces to lend or to donate to the city, and they're things like enhance the community and contribute and beautify. And what really occurs to me is that what public art allows us to do is to live through others and live through each other. It's the phrase that Patrick ended his talk with, living through others. I think that's really what we do when we successfully bring these projects to fruition. So I had not planned to say any of that, but let's see, I'm leaving early, Michi, yeah, okay. I wear 3 hats at the university. I'm a painter, as Milton mentioned. I think that's what I was put on earth to do, but I only came back to it in the past 5 or 6 years of my life after trying many other things that I did reasonably well, architecture, planning, a lot of international work. I'm chair of the Public Art Commission. The Public Art Commission here at Ithaca, we've been working about 4 or 5 years. The actual plan is 3 years old, and it's on the website if any of you wish to see it. And what we do is help the public as they are wanting to donate or lend pieces of art. So a lot of our work is legal and financial, and we deal with the streets department for cleaning sculptures and theft, as well as the aesthetic components. We represent, there's 7 of us who are appointed by the mayor, 5 ex officio members, and the knowledge base is art, architecture, planning, the business world, Ithaca Downtown Partnership is represented, the nonprofit world. It's a very lively group. I tell you, we pull in 12 different directions, but we're having a good time trying to move Ithaca forward in that endeavor. And then I'm Associate Dean for Academic Affairs in the graduate school. So the graduate school is a centralized unit, and we administer all 100 fields in humanities, social sciences, biological sciences, and physical sciences. I will tell you there's a lot of interest in dual degree programs and collaboration in the academic sort, so I feel as though my personal life typifies interdisciplinary work in learning, and my professional life typifies interdisciplinary work and collaboration in knowledge production. I'm going to talk briefly, and I wouldn't mind if somebody watches the clock since I've long since stopped wearing a watch, about just some things I've observed in those various occupations, more in the way of independent bits of information that I hope you will find useful. From the scholarly end, there are many, many writers who have written about the importance of art to the city. Richard Sennett, historically, has talked about the importance of art in the public realm and civic life. Richard Florida, most recently, has talked about the creative economy. You probably hear these things on public radio. The other thing I am, apparently, is a book pusher, so I'm always going to give you a list of books to read with my homework. Stanley Fish, university presidents such as Derek Bach at Harvard and Lee Bollinger, they're all very much aware now in their individual ways of keeping the arts alive, trying to make sure that there's as much activity in the arts world as there is in the market economy and market-driven forces. And I think with Lee Bollinger, I studied architecture at Columbia years ago, but I see from reading my alumni newsletters that it looks like the place is just, terribly exciting and fun with all the events that he's doing in the city, in Harlem. He did something with the ballet, one of the ballet, London opera or ballet companies, and a dance school in Harlem, some production of a piece. I have since forgotten the name of it. But it sounds like, among all the other things we can look to public art for and art, it's just really, really fun. It sounds like it's really enjoyable. So there's also something called, there was an academy, a panel that was convened recently to talk about campus connections in public art. And our president at Syracuse, our former president, and people at Cornell were involved in that most immediate way to figure out what we can do to collaborate here regionally. So those are several things I've seen happening in the academic end. As far as other precedents, I'm going to have to read a little bit of this. Washington University in St. Louis, which apparently is one of the oldest university-affiliated art schools in the United States, recently supported a collaboration between their School of Art, Gallery of Art, Department of Art History and Archaeology, which is in Arts and Sciences, the Art and Architecture Library. All of those people came together to create a campus-wide umbrella organization for the study and promotion of visual culture, which will involve the development of collaborative interdisciplinary curricula and programs, as well as the creation of a facility designed by Pritzker Prize-winning architect Fumihiko Maki. Washington University is also home to the University City Sculpture Series, which is now in its 15th year, and this allows students to propose, build, and install artwork in public spaces and places throughout the city. This, too, is a one-of-a-kind project in the United States, apparently, and it's co-sponsored by the city, the Regional Arts Commission of St. Louis, and the University City Municipal Committee on Arts and Letters. So that's something that is kind of a model for what we might like to do here, perhaps on a smaller scale in Ithaca. And finally, in that realm of what's going on campuses, Public Art Review, which is the leading national journal in the field of public art, has its current issue devoted to campus art. And it has named the top 10 campuses in public art in the nation. And Cornell's not on there yet, and I do say yet. So it's a real mix of schools, some small, some large, some state, some private. MIT is on there. And I have a couple of articles which I can leave with Milton, which describe MIT's collection. There's a lot of permanent pieces that are apparently all over the campus and in people's offices. There are some temporary pieces. They have a strong history of community involvement, apparently, between the campus and the local community. They also have, unbeknownst to me, a Percent for Art project on the campus since 1968, which is something that we tried to get going in the city. It's a hard argument in hard, difficult economic times to get developers to agree to put aside 1% for art. But I think it might be an easier thing for campuses to do for a variety of reasons, which we could, explore later. At the Public Art Commission, our role is pretty limited. The collaborations with Milton mean a lot, with the CCA, with Cornell. We have an interesting project. If any of you will be here in November, that will be unveiled. I don't want to say too much about it, but it is a memorial piece that was commissioned by one of our public citizens, and the piece is being done by Bob Bertoya, who has since left the room, but I guarantee it'll be a very interesting and interactive piece for you to visit on the Commons. We try to support Art in the Heart, which has been our long-standing attempt to do public art in the city. So far our pieces are a little modest, although we have contribution from across the nation, and we're interested in working with the leader of our downtown development office to support more monumental, coherent pieces. And then we support the Greater Ithaca Art Trail. For those of you who haven't been here recently, it's about 8 years old, and it's an open studios program. The two open weekends were last weekend and the weekend before that. I had a gazillion people traipsing up and down my stairs all weekend, since my studio is on the 3rd floor. But that's another event that seems to be gaining more and more success, international as well as national attention. I'm not here to promote those two, but I did bring brochures, and I left them on the table for you to pick up if you'd like at the back. In conclusion, what do I want to say? With respect to our students and their development, it occurs to me that art is probably the singular area of inquiry and practice that both disciplines students and frees them at the same time. And I think for that reason alone, it's really worth keeping our eye on how we can keep art, right at the forefront of the academic endeavor. With respect to cities and what we're interested in downtown, I'm sure any of you could mention cities and pieces of art that are just iconic. I grew up in Philadelphia, so the Love Statue and the Button, and Philadelphia has done wonderful things in exhibiting public art, the mural program, using it with schools. We have in mind to invite actually the head of their mural arts program up to Ithaca, because we have a lot of interest in murals. And murals can be really good or they could be really, really bad. So we want to be on the really good side of things. And then lastly, with respect to Cornell and the kind of collaborations we would like to support, I can't help but think that having notice such as MIT got, and having very noticeable public art and collaborations and performances on campus will contribute to our rankings. And I know that, especially at the undergrad level, we're always concerned about our rankings wherever they show up. It's a bit of a lateral approach to getting on the radar screen, but I think it is no less important. I think that if we succeed in this, Cornell will be a very good destination. We will think of it as the campus as a destination for our students, and also of the campus as a point of departure or origination for very important and cutting-edge scholarship. So thank you for spending time with my remarks. Don't forget your suggestions. Milton knows how to reach me if I'm not here when you make them, and Michi, of course, can fill in as well. So enjoy the rest of your weekend as well. We're happy to have you here.
Thank you, Terry. We know why the graduate school, we know that the graduate school is in very good hands with Terry. She's been a great resource. I just want to spend a couple of minutes and then open up for discussion to talk about how we are trying to frame the next, in a way, the next 50 years of the arts at Cornell. Could you dim the lights a little bit, please? Thanks. As I mentioned at the beginning, the idea of the panel was not to come to necessarily a definitive point in terms of where the arts will be. One of the creative things about Cornell and about the arts is that it's dynamic. And I'm reminded of a quote that I've read before, but that I'll read again, by Paul Ricoeur, when he says, "To bring experience into language is not to change it into something else, but in articulating and developing it, to make it become itself," end quote. And I think that speaks to some of the themes that I'm hearing that are resonating in the remarks of our panelists, in the sense that art is a form of research. It's not absent of an intellectual component. And I think that many times the separation between the arts and the intellectual, more scientific paths of inquiry are seen to be very distinct. And one of the things that I think is important at Cornell is to begin to look at the landscape of what we have on campus as a configuration to work with, and to look also at our peer institutions and to see the competitive landscape of what's out there. And it appears that that we're doing a lot of things well, which is good news, and could be doing a lot of things better as we reposition, in a way, the arts for the future. And in talking about the configuration of the arts, we're talking about allowing for experimentation to occur in very dynamic and organic ways, sometimes within the classroom, sometimes outside of the classroom. When we're talking about innovation, one of the things that we need to innovate is capital, resources. And how do you efficiently finance the arts? It's something that we don't normally talk about in that lexicon, but how do we efficiently finance art as research, art as a vehicle for dynamic examination, discovery, humanity, civility, all these things that are very nebulous. Actually, the arts takes up these very nebulous and ambiguous ideas to strengthen them and to give them form. And finally, how do we take the fact that we're in Ithaca seriously and begin to look at the way in which the campus connects with the city that Cornell has been born in? I think it's very important, and I think the relationship to Ithaca is very key going forward. Finally, as Terry mentioned, with the creative economy and all these other aspects of the marketplace, the arts actually is one of the few things that cuts across multiple economies. Competition. Cornell is faced with, I think, very formidable competition that we didn't face in the past. We have 12 arts-related units. We have 9 arts departments and 3 units like the Johnson Museum, Cornell Cinema, and the Cornell Concert Series. Just in the past 5 to 7 years, we've seen Syracuse initiate a $15 million connection with the city of Syracuse, working with Senator Schumer and Clinton, working with the Department of Architecture and the president of the university. We've seen increase and acceleration of the spending from Harvard, Columbia, as Terry mentioned, as well as Princeton, who just received a $100 million gift for the arts. Additionally, we've seen the beginning of design schools that didn't even exist 5 years ago, in the case of Stanford's Plattner Design School, which is very much about the impact of design within the society. And then, of course, the MIT Media Lab and the NYU Tisch School of the Arts are models really for forging a very progressive agenda in the arts. With MIT, historically, that institution with the MIT Media Lab has been one which has been really a hotbed of experiment and discovery around technology and issues of technology. At Cornell, as you know, we have a fairly dispersed universe. On the right are the colleges, and on the left are the departments and units. And the blue represent non-academic departments and units. And while it is an amazing universe to work within, it can be also incredibly frustrating, and primarily in some ways for the students. Our students find it difficult to cut across the silos that we've created in the academic institution because we have a decentralized 7 undergraduate college foundation. It's very difficult to cross-pollinate and to communicate academically with our other colleagues across campus. And so it's very difficult to break down in some cases the barriers that exist between working with Choo in dance and working from the point of view of architecture, working with students. These are the kinds of barriers and the kinds of silos that we're seeing breaking down through the national, not national, but the New Life Science Initiative and other areas within the sciences where it's just pragmatic to break down the silos. In the arts, we need, I think, a different paradigm to work with in the future that allows us to retain the uniqueness of this decentralized college structure, but somehow to begin to work across those silos much more effectively and robustly. Also, Cornell has a very rich group of institutes and centers, and those exist, again, outside of the academic universe of teaching. And research then is something that happens both within the classroom, but it also happens within these special institutes that are very unique to Cornell, not in their constitution, but in the magnitude and the amount of them. And I'm only citing 4 or 5 of them here, but when we look at them, they have a power, the ones that are up. They have a power in terms of what they've been able to do and the impact that they've had really on research and the contours of how Cornell is looked at from its peer institutions. The Institute for Social Sciences is an amazing creation that was just born really in the last 5 years. And it has really galvanized, I think, with David Harris's leadership, the ability of social sciences to recruit faculty, to do cluster hires, to fundraise, and to actually sponsor tremendously impactful research. In the case of the Society for the Humanities, in addition to its role, it was born, I believe, in 1965 as well. It has also, more recently in the last 10 years, sponsored something called the School for Criticism and Theory, which is known across the country as the preeminent scholarship or scholarly program in the summer for those interested in cultural and literary theory. Computing and information sciences was a new paradigm that came out of the relationship that computer science and technology had or didn't have, and that emerged into, I think, a very powerful condition. And finally, the New Life Sciences Initiative, which has really laid the groundwork for a good portion of the capital campaign that will really transform the life sciences in the future. The question that you keep asking is, where is the arts and design research in this universe of possibilities in terms of really forwarding the research agendas within the university? And while the CCA and other elements of departments and colleges are out there doing a tremendous job in terms of trying to latch on to investment in their faculty's initiative. The problem, again, is that the dispersion of and the non-centralization of these activities doesn't necessarily add up to all that it might with more consolidation and working across the silos. Innovation. One of the things that we see when we are out there looking for sponsorship, particularly amongst corporate partners and corporate partnerships, is the fact that a tremendous amount of capital in the United States doesn't have an investment attached to it that's better than reinvesting in the company itself. There's a tremendous amount of buying back of stock of American companies. In that sense, what we're finding is that we can actually do research and development actually much more efficiently in some cases than corporations. Quarter by quarter reporting puts a lot of pressure actually on dollars that would go into research and development. And a lot of universities, including the MIT Media Lab, get a tremendous amount of support from companies that are looking for a platform of intellectual capital that's diverse, that is experimental, that's not mapped into the corporate culture, and therefore biased in terms of ideas and their possibilities. And these are things where I think it provides an enormous future potential for us going forward. Concentrated collaborations with cultural institutions, I think, is another untapped resource, quite frankly, that we're looking at. In terms of transformation, the way in which the council has worked with the city on the installation that Patrick described is just part of a larger role that I think we can play and that the university can play in the notion of how to transform the urban economy of Ithaca. We've seen tremendous depletion of demographic, 18 to 24, 18 to 34-year-olds leaving upstate New York as a whole. This is a part of the country, this is a part of the universe of universities and academic institutions where we have the ability, I think, to reshape the the relationship between Cornell and the city. To do that, we feel that we have to act. We have to act in the public realm. We have to act in the realm of Cornell. And that actually begins to accelerate, in some ways, the kinds of activities that open up possibility. And I think when we open up possibility, we then see that the arts can function not just as a kind of decor on top of the core intellectual or scientific functions of the university, but in fact can be part and parcel of that endeavor and that enterprise. Valuation, how we value the arts. I think that as we've heard these terms, cluster economy, creative economy, service economy, knowledge economy, actually the arts cuts across all of these. And I think within the university, there is a notion that the knowledge or the service economy does function even within the university. And I think the arts, one of the roles of the arts within the university is to educate and to provide education for those who do not want to become artists. Okay, a kind of exposure, a kind of experiential affect that is felt humanistically at the core of the enterprise of the university. At the same time, the knowledge economy portion of that is that we have professional schools, we have schools where the knowledge base and the development of new knowledge is part and parcel of the arts as a form of research. And so we actually have these two aspects to the arts that are existing side by side, sometimes comfortably and sometimes uncomfortably. And I think that's where within the classroom we have to engender intellectual insights that actually extend out of the classroom, and then there's another space actually for experimentation. And finally, ideas, thoughts to open up the discussion. What do we do? Recognize that art and design are a powerful engine of research. Try to configure some kind of laboratory where the centralized funding of arts research can actually have impact instead of being perhaps minimized or atomized by the decentralization that's unique and that's unique to Cornell. Embedding social purpose in funded research. I think there's a tremendous amount of possibility and impact for us when we begin to see the arts as having also a function and a role in terms of how it's impacting society. Identifying synergies between the developed and underdeveloped world. And we've seen alumni like Kevin McGovern and others developing devices and pushing ideas into the undeveloped world that, quite frankly, didn't have a voice before the interest of some of these entrepreneurs stepped in to try to make something happen, whether it's water, treatment, or other things like that. And I think that's a tremendously impactful role that the arts actually can play as a filter for and as a translator for technology transfer and the transference of intellectual capital from the university to the community. And finally, creating a value loop within Cornell where within our sciences, within our other places in the university, we can actually invest in those ideas within Cornell and begin to use design of the arts, again, as a filter by which these ideas find their way into real products, real spaces, and that in that way, I think we create a very rich environment for students who are working collaboratively. We have solar decathlon students working with 5 different students across the university, including the business school and the engineering school. We have students working in architecture and furniture design collaboratively with faculty from art and architecture. So there's a tremendous amount that we can do there. The council has undertaken 2 specific initiatives that really have started to implement some of these things as an example for more involvement and engagement. One of them is the beginning of our 5-year installation artist role, with Patrick as the first one of those. And secondly, the CCAX Design Group, which was featured last year upon their first showing at the International Contemporary Furniture Fair, is one of the best collections out of 1,900 booths, and that's the first for Cornell. We are working with the Mayor's Ithaca Collegetown Vision Committee to work on an idea competition for Collegetown coming up next year, and we're very excited about the possibility of re-engaging the site of Patrick's sculpture as well as the front court there in front of the Schwartz Center as a place where we can really begin to imagine a different kind of transition and gateway between the university and Ithaca. I think I'll stop there and ask the panel to rejoin me. I think Terry had to go, but ask them to rejoin me, and then open up for a discussion and questions and thoughts on your part. So thank you, and now it's your turn to come back to us.
Just as a terminological clarification, when you say arts research, what form does it take? You mean
What form
you
is?
Yeah.
Well, I think when I'm a professor of architecture, and when I think that when we look at the relationship of art to its context, what we're looking at is first the context. And in that sense, whether it's the design of furniture or it's the design of a building, what's very important to maintaining the rigor of our arts programs is context. And I think that's where the research begins for me. And maybe differently for Jume and Patrick, but in my experience, that's where the notion of what the consequences of the artistic production could be are in that insight that you're bringing to the context. And that means that whether it's an urban, whether it's Collegetown, or whether it's a hospital and looking for how to do a better kidney machine, it's about the totality of how design and the arts and those things that we experience is having consequence. I think that's the way I would frame it.
Well, I would say in dance, for instance, an area of dance that has really been blossoming the last 10, 15 years is dance studies, and there's a lot of theoretical work and research being done in how to understand the body in terms of the culture, in terms of social issues. And the body in dance has always been not only a representation or reflection or a reflexive agent for the dance that it's performing, but it's also a place that it's also a forum for negotiating differences to work out issues. And it's been that way ever since, through the history of modern dance. And also as a performer, and as myself, my primary interest is in performance, in the actual moving. And I would love to find the time to understand the world as, the world today. I know this is a very large statement and doesn't mean very much, except what I mean is that the body is so, it is so finite, and it grows and it dies, it goes away. And it becomes even more apparent, I think, for us as dancers, and outside of dance as well, in our world today with the wars that are going on everywhere. And I would like to find some way to, to work through this, to work through what does it mean? What does it mean? What are we doing with ourselves? What kind of meaning are we placing on our bodies if we can allow them to just be destroyed? So that's something I would like to, at some time look into myself.
I guess for me, the idea that sometimes you find that your art is informing your life. You learn some things while working on the, with stick work or whatever, your approach or so. It just, you think if I could just turn around and use some of this, of what I've known or what I've practiced here on real, daily living problems, sometimes they really improve. And so you wonder often, that the arts is such a freeing event. It allows so much, vision to develop, and you wonder if maybe it wouldn't be practical to try to discover how this activity of art making you could kind of look at the bigger impact that it had on society, and similarly how that could play out in practical use in some way.
Yeah, I have a three-part question for Patrick. First one is the sculpture in College Town permanent, or if it's a temporary, how long will it be there?
Yeah, it's temporary, and at 1 year they'll start looking at it. Probably could last 2 years. By 3 years it's starting to shed.
You may have answered my second one, which is when you dismantle a sculpture, do you reuse the saplings and sticks, or?
No, they're not reusable, and because of public, the person who walks by at any one time not ever having, they may have never seen the sculpture again. The sculpture needs to come down while it still looks good. It can't look disheveled because it eats into the overall impact of it. So it's generally you bring a chipper at its final end and just chip it up. Because
You want to help? We're going to take it down a year from now.
I always say that the line between trash and treasure with sticks is very thin.
And the third part is when you go into the woods to cut saplings, are you practicing sustainable forestry?
Well, the one thing is that you're cutting these trees off at the top. It's a pruning. A lot of them will come back. A lot of them we encountered in the forest you saw had already died because as the bigger trees, flourish, some of the small trees just plain die out from under. So I think that we're doing pretty good in terms of the way we're approaching it. Oftentimes we'll gather from areas that are just about to be destroyed, because of development. So I'm always kind of looking for good places to find saplings that don't have big impact. You don't want to go into a high meadow in the Rockies and start cutting all these twigs that take years and 20 years to get 10 feet high. So you have to be really careful about where you cut.
Shannon.
I have some questions along this line. I'm going to read them all, and you don't have to answer them all. Some of them are yes or no. The first is, have you considered covering it in ivy of any form? Do people mourn the sculpture when it's gone? Like, do they, with other sculptures that you've had anyway, is there a permanent memory in its place, like a living thing or a gravestone, or do the concrete holes just do people take souvenirs, and has anyone ever proposed under it yet, or have you had permanent relationships for?
Well, these are love nests. They're places of conception. People get married there. They go further. The pieces are remembered because often I'll be in another state, in another place, and someone will say, I saw that piece that you made over in Ithaca. That was the best, but it might be 10 years, and it still has a vivid memory about the way that it's set in its site, about their reaction to it, about what it meant to them, and how much the materials, even beyond the sculpture, meant to them as kind of materials and their own knowledge of it. In places where, like botanic gardens, where they can tolerate, more disintegration, a lot of times they will plant ivy and things on it and just wait and see what it does, because they're really interested in that. We haven't had any real gravestones yet, packed
There's always
up
a
against
first.
the thing. There's always the first. Here lay. All the chips. We'll put them in a flower bed nearby.
The university, in its conception, especially Cornell, is nothing if not a practical place. And the reason why we're investing in life sciences could be described in very practical terms. You're asking somebody for a $100 million commitment. There's an anticipation of an outcome. Through the expression of the human genome, we're going to solve a specific problem that helps humanity. Same thing with the market forces we study. There's research done so that there is an output, a very practical output to grow the economic engine that is our country. Sometimes it's more difficult for people to wrap their mind around what a construct like the one you're describing would look like. If we invested $100 million into a design center, the question is, should people have an anticipated expected outcome, and what might that look like based upon your experience with MIT's lab and what Stanford is doing? I know about some of the things they're doing, and one of them I imagine, or one of them I heard about, is trying to restructure K through 12 education through their perception of the arts in California. It's one of the things Stanford is working on. MIT, of course, everyone knows about the $100 laptop. As an expression that has a potential to solve significant world problems. But given your experience is, how would you help people frame these potential investments, and what do you think we should say to people about the expected outcome?
I think it's a good question. I think it's not a question that's unique to Cornell. Two ways to answer that. I think that what we have learned about interdisciplinarity is that we need, and I think Cornell really believes this to the core, and that's what makes it an incredibly strong place to study art at Cornell, is that the rigor of disciplinary knowledge is the core of the academic enterprise. When you move to interdisciplinary activities, I think that's where, instead of looking at just knowledge sharing, to look instead at project-based research, which is a way of learning, but it's also a way of actually creating output and producing something. And I think that project-based learning as the arts contribution to advancing the impacts that you're talking about, whether it be a $100 laptop or whether it be redesigning K through 12 education through the redesign of books or the infusion of different related activities within the K through 12 day. I think the example that you mentioned was actually a kindergartner's first day at school to design that. Pretty interesting project. So I think these are the kinds of project-based activities that shake us up from the block and tackle kind of disciplinary knowledge that actually we need in order to tackle these problems, but the construct for the project is something that can be designed. And that's where I think, that's the way that I think it would be framed, would be to say that these are temporal-based, project-based initiatives that are going to be different this year than they are 10 years from now because the world will be different. And so somehow one is tracking culture, one is tracking market forces through the selection and the construction of these project-based endeavors. And that's a very, that's a more radical way of engaging in research than currently exists in the arts, I would say. I don't know if that...
Yeah, I would think you always would have to have some gauge of how you're going to spend money. That's only practical. One thing I see is that oftentimes somewhere along the education, you say, well, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. But that's not really true in the arts. A lot of times the best things happen when you try to reinvent something, and your particular take on it is kind of strange, and you think you're getting it, but you're not. You're taking an alternative route. And the other thing is that I often believe that there are other streams of consciousness going on parallel to our regular life, and we have these streams we tap into. Sometimes as a sculptor, we move over into another stream of consciousness, and we become very sensitive to other kinds of data and so forth. And I think these are very important places to mind, so that we allow freedom, so people can really start thinking again about how to solve problems, and to solve new problems. And part of that is learning to think a little bit differently and get out of your workaday world and figure out how to reinvent something,
Sue?
Well, I think so. The question of what good is art, and how do we need art, and if we didn't have art, we'd probably make a computer. But art is everything we have: your shirt, the jacket you wear, these shoes, that building, this wall. I mean, art is everything we live with. Otherwise, we'd be living in a black box, and probably, you can do it for the same price. So there is no particular price, I don't think, for art. I think that you didn't say that, but no, I mean, more than half of the student body of this university participate in at least one of these different categories that you showed here. So this is not for a minority group at Cornell, but this encompasses over half of the student body participates in some art-related activity, and they take that away if they happen to be a doctor or an engineer or a school teacher or a musician. But all those things go into the education at Cornell. And, what's an education worth? I mean, is it worth $100 million? You could probably do it for less. So I think that that's sort of if you invested $1 billion, you might never see a product from it. But you might see a better building probably from it. But it does create a little environment. I'd like to ask a question of you, Milton. Of all those different, the 12 different disciplines, do the faculty really want to have a group, a central center for the arts? Is there a sense of that within that?
Yeah, I think two things. One is, yes, actually the council, made up of representatives of all 12 arts-related units, are behind this idea, which was first hatched in 1965 by Jim McConkie in a different form, albeit. So it's been around for a long time. I think that the models that have been established since that time are functioning pretty well at the university in terms of the other institutes and centers. The other thing is that in 15 years from now, you'll be interacting with 30% new faculty in this university. If there's any kind of point in time where a shift in sensibility is occurring, I think it's now, because we have over 600 faculty which will not be with us. Hopefully they'll be with us still, walking around and alive and providing us with their wisdom, but they won't be full-time faculty in 15 or 17 years. So that creates a tremendous moment for us, and I think we'll hear it in the campaign, of recruiting top faculty. First of all, they have to believe that this is the most creative place on earth. That's part of wanting to come and be part of an academic enterprise. The city, the university, that culture is alive, it's dynamic, it's not staid, it's not stable, but it's dynamic. Secondly, for the arts faculty, that there's something more than my specific discipline that I can bounce ideas off of. More and more, the way that students are being educated, I mean, the faculty that fill in for those who will not be here in 15 years are people from MIT, from Stanford, from Cornell, and they've really been educated in a very different way, much more towards a project-based approach than perhaps we were educated in. And so I think they come to us with, right there, a very different sensibility. And I think to take advantage of that, I think we need this kind of structure, very similar to how the structure is working with life sciences, CIS, Society for the Humanities, and Institute for Social Sciences. Oh, time. Any other thoughts? I would invite, just first of all, to thank Jim again, but also to invite anyone who's interested to drop by the Committee on the Arts meeting tomorrow at 10:30 in the Schwartz Center, where it's another opportunity to become more fully engaged over time in these kinds of initiatives. I want to thank again Terry Plater, who had to leave, Choo, and Patrick Doherty, and all of you. Hopefully, this is the beginning of a dialogue, and this group that we've had in the room today will disseminate this to a much larger group, and that we begin a very robust discussion as we head into, I think, a very interesting time for Cornell and for the arts. So thank you very much.